I'm excited today because I'm starting this new series I've entitled The Life You've Always Wanted. And what I pray and really what I hope to share with you today and in the weeks to come is really just some reflections, things that God's been doing in my life that has really been helpful, and my hope is that He will use it in your life right where you're at as well. And so I want to get into it this morning by sharing something with you that's definitely going to date me, okay? But I'm okay with that. I'm going to say it anyway, and tell you that growing up in the 80s and the 90s, like I said, I'm old, one of my favorite bands was this little known band from Ireland called U2. Y'all ever heard of them? Any other fans here this morning of U2? Anyone like them? Okay, good. That's more than the first service. I think all the first service was still asleep. I mean, Bono and these guys, they were amazing, and when you still listen to their old stuff, I would say they still are, okay? New stuff, maybe a little hit or miss. But what's interesting about them was back in 1987, they released a song that was entitled that I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. And when they released this song, it connected with millions and millions of people. And just this past week, out of curiosity, I went to Google. I didn't use AI or a chat bot or anything. I went to Google, and I just quickly searched to find out how many times has this song, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, how many times has it been played? And this is just part of it. This blew my mind. Between YouTube as well as another platform, it has been Spotify. It has been played over 1 billion times, this song. And as you all know, Spotify has not been out forever, and neither has YouTube. But between just those two platforms, that doesn't take into account Apple Music, and then for all of us old heads, listening to it in the radio back in the 80s and 90s, and on cassette tapes. Y'all remember what those were? Some of you. CDs, maybe even records. Just this song was listened to and has probably been listened to billions and billions of times. And the reason for that is because of one main line in the song that some of you, as you're now probably thinking of the song, you know this line. And I'll put it on the screen. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. This line here, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. When Bono wrote that line, he had no idea that he was writing something that was going to connect very deeply in the hearts of so many people. That even to this day, all of you young folks, if you listen to the song, you catch it very quickly. Now, over the years, it's interesting, Bono's been interviewed and he's been asked about this song a number of times. And what he has shared is that when he wrote this song, he wrote it from a place that as a Christian, because Bono believes in Jesus, that as a Christian, it was like a prayer of sorts as well as a praise to God as he was searching for transcendence and meaning in life. And you can see this in different moments, in different places of the song, but I want to show you one place in particular in two sections toward the end of the song, and this is what he writes. He wrote, I believe in the kingdom come, then all the colors will bleed into one. But yes, I'm still running. You broke the bonds and you loosed the chains, carried the cross of my shame. Oh, my shame. You know I believe it. Did you ever catch that before? It's powerful, isn't it? Toward the end of the song, what Bono is doing is he is singing an anthem, if you will, somewhat, where he's saying to the God of heaven that he believes in the kingdom of Jesus that is coming. His hope is in Jesus, that one day Jesus is going to return and he's going to make all things new and he's going to eradicate all the evil and sin and suffering and death and sickness in this world. But then he also, in that last little section there, what he is saying is that he is grateful for what Jesus did for him. His death on the cross that has freed him from his sin and freed him from his shame. So he writes that, but then right afterwards, he closes the song with these words. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. It's interesting because what Bono is doing is he is looking to the heavens as a Christian who has a relationship with Yahweh, a relationship with Jesus, and he is saying, I believe and I have hope because of you. And I am so grateful, but something is still missing. There's still something that's off. There's something that I can't find a fulfillment for, there's something I'm missing. And he doesn't know what it is. That's the thing. He doesn't know. But what he's saying is that he's still searching with the hope that he'll find it. Now, as I have thought about this song, and I've thought about my own life, I see a connection to this song, and specifically that statement, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for, really in two different distinct ways based on what I would call two chapters of my life. And the way I would break my life up, and maybe some of you, maybe many of you would say the same for you, is that I break my life up into the chapter known as before Jesus and then after Jesus. That's how I would look at my life, before Jesus and after Jesus. And when I think about my life before Jesus, and then after Jesus is not after I walked away from Jesus, but after I gave my life to Jesus. But as I think about my life before Jesus, the best way I can describe it is that it was empty. Now, it was not because I had an empty life. I had a lot in my life. I had 2 parents at home and 4 brothers and all the stuff, and being brought up in a home that was about God and about family and lots of fun, okay? So there was a lot there. But it wasn't an empty life, but my soul, if you will, was empty. And the older I got, probably in high school and going past high school, there were times that as I would reflect on life, and oftentimes this was when I was laying in my bed, my head on my pillow, trying to drift off to sleep, this thought would run through my mind. There has to be more to life than this. Have any of you ever thought that before? With everything going on in life, there has to be more to life than this. Well, I would think of that a lot. And where I felt that there was just something missing. Well, at the age of 20, when I went to a camp as a counselor, finally, one night while I was there, after someone had spoken about Jesus for the first time in my life, the Holy Spirit of God opened my heart, opened my mind to see this Jesus that I grew up hearing about in a preacher's home my entire life for who he really is. And when I saw him, I then was like, oh my gosh, you are what I've been looking for. You are the one that I've been longing for. And so I gave my life to Jesus, and instantly in that moment when I did, I experienced this flood of joy and peace and comfort and forgiveness. It was all this washing over my life, and it was just the love and the grace of God. Through Jesus that I'd heard about, I'd listened to people sing about. I even would sing these songs myself, but I'd never experienced it. But when I did, it changed me. And so it was very evident, even to me, which is, I know this is hard to say, and we all deal with this, but a lot of times other people see changes we don't see in us. But I saw it, that the old Jonathan was no more. There was a new Jonathan. This new Jonathan loved to pray and talk to Jesus. This new Jonathan loved to read scriptures. This new Jonathan even loved to go to church. And I'm just telling you, for preachers' kids who always look to get out of church and skip church, that was a big shift. Even my parents noticed that one. I wanted to go to church. But everything began to change in my life. But as I thought about just that impact on my life with giving my life to Jesus, and I began to think about what Bono wrote here as a Christian, if someone would have approached me in 1996 and they would have said, hey, Jonathan, look at these sections to the song that you like. Okay, yeah, here's what he's doing. Oh. Now look at how he closes right afterwards. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. I would have immediately pushed back on that and said, what's wrong with Bono? What do you mean you haven't found what you're looking for? That you're still searching? It's Jesus. He is the one. I just experienced this. I know what it's like before Jesus and after Jesus. What's wrong with Bono? What is it that he is missing? Well, it's been 29 years since that happened in my life. And in that time, I will tell you that through life and just aging and experiences, that I can now identify with what Bono wrote there. As someone in a relationship with Jesus that still experiences at times this disconnect, this feeling, maybe like that line, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for, I can identify with him in that. Now, to be sure, it's different, okay? Before I gave my life to Jesus, it was loud. It was like in a volume of 10. After I've given my life to Jesus, I would say it's probably at a volume of maybe 2 or 3, but it's still there. And so over these 29 years of walking in this relationship and living this relationship with Jesus and having this lingering at times, this sense that something is missing and there's more that I'm not experiencing, I've really began to really go to God and just question and try to say, Father, what is this? How do I get back to that place where I would have pushed back on people like Bono and even on like myself saying, what do you mean? What do you mean you haven't found what you're looking for? And so today, as we enter into this series, The Life You've Always Wanted, what I believe after just through these years of having many, many conversations with other people, hundreds and hundreds of conversations, and knowing that I'm not the only one that has given their life to Jesus that also can identify with Bono, that feels this lingering thing, like there's more, but I don't know what it is, but I want it. That today what I want to do is walk you through one of the key truths that God has been teaching me and really reminding me of as of late. And the key truth that he's been speaking to me about, and I want to put it on the screen for you, is this one here. The life you want is a life you currently don't know you want. The life you want is a life you currently don't know you want. Now, I know that may sound a little confusing, and it may even sound like a word salad, like some politicians that you listen to today. But let me try to explain what I mean by that, and hopefully this will help. Before 29 years ago, when I gave my life to Jesus, I believed in my soul when I had this longing that there is something that I'm looking for. I did not believe it was Jesus until God showed me it was Jesus. I believed it was in anything and everything but Jesus. I believed it was in relationships and pleasure and money and recognition and success and all that. You tracking with me? So I didn't know that it was Jesus until I saw that it was Jesus. And then it was going, oh, okay. The life that I've always wanted is not the life that I thought I wanted. I was longing for something that I didn't recognize or know. And that was this relationship with Jesus. So I came to see that all along I was created for a relationship with Jesus. My soul was longing for Jesus. I believe that everyone's soul is longing for Jesus. And so after I experienced that, I then knew what I didn't know before. But today what he's been showing me is within the same truth, is that within this relationship dynamic we have with Jesus, for those of us that are followers of Jesus, that are Christians today, that there is something about this relationship dynamic that we long for in our soul that we don't even realize what it is until we see it. And a lot of us have not seen it. And I believe that's why so many of us are still living our lives feeling like, but there's still something more. There's still something more. And so I want to try to show you what that truth is in this relationship you have with Jesus by taking you to what has become one of my favorite stories in the gospel. And if you have the scriptures and you want to follow along with me, it's in Luke's gospel. And we're going to be in Luke chapter 5, if you want to follow along. If not, the verses will be on the screen. And Luke begins by telling us what, again, is one of my favorite stories. And he writes it like this. Luke 5, beginning in verse 1. He said, as the crowd was pressing in on Jesus to hear God's word, he was standing by Lake Gennesaret. I think I'm saying that right, or Gennesaret. You can say it a couple ways. And he saw two boats at the edge of the lake, and the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. And he got into one of the boats, which belonged to Simon. He asked him to put out a little from the land, and then he sat down and he was teaching the crowds from the boat. Okay, so this is very early on in the life and the ministry of Jesus. Jesus was a rabbi. He had just come out and started teaching, performing miracles. And as you read through the Gospels, what you discover about Jesus is that he stood out amongst all the other rabbis. When Jesus would speak, they said he spoke with authority. They said that he spoke, and when he would speak, they said they were amazed by what he said. Now, the reason was because Jesus, being the Son of God, knew perfectly all these truths. And so when he would communicate through stories and illustrations and truths. And what would happen is it would spark the imagination of the people listening, and it would move their hearts, unlike they'd ever heard before. For the other rabbis, it was sterile. For Jesus, it had life. It was kind of like black and white and color. You follow me? That was the difference. So due to this and miracles, all these people started bringing all their friends, all their family, all their pets, everybody, the babies, to go and listen to Jesus whenever he would speak. So on this day, what Luke's telling us is Jesus is standing here. He has a lake behind him. He has all these thousands of people likely crowding into him. And they're getting really tight. And the reason is because they wanted to hear him. And out in the open, it's hard to hear one person when you have thousands of people. So Jesus turns and he sees a boat. There's actually a couple. He goes, he steps into one of them. It was the one that was owned by Simon, who we know as Peter. And he looks at Peter, they're washing their nets, and he said, okay, here's what I need. Will you please take me out just a little ways offshore so that I can give them room, and I can have room, but also so that when he spoke, his voice would carry over the water. The water would be, if you will, kind of like a megaphone that would amplify his voice so all these people could hear him. And Simon, of course, said, yeah, I'll do that. So he goes out, he anchors his boat, Jesus takes a seat, and he begins to preach to these people. And then look at what happens next. Verse 4. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into deep water and let down your nets for a catch. So after Jesus finished his message, he prayed, blessed everybody, dismissed them, said, go get you a bite to eat. See you next time, next service. He looks at Simon and says, Simon, I'm not ready to go to shore yet. I want for us to go out to deeper water because I want to go fishing with you. And look at what Simon said to him. Verse 5. Master, Simon replied, we've worked hard all night long and caught nothing. So Simon looks at Jesus, and he, with this term of respect and honor, which was pretty common in their day, they would refer to rabbis, pastors, preachers, as men of God. They would call them master. So he said, Master, respectfully, he said in so many words, I don't really think now is a good time. And the reason was because he and his boys had just been out all night long fishing, and every time they dropped their nets and pulled them up, they pulled up nothing. So he says that, but then he goes on to say something else, and it's at the end of verse 5. He said, but if you say so, I'll let down the nets. In essence, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. I think it's going to be a colossal waste of time. We've already cleaned the nets, by the way. We're tired, but if you really want to do this, I'll do this. And Jesus, just using my imagination, probably looked at the nets, looked at Simon, looked at the water, and said, yeah, let's go do this. And so off they went, and they dropped their nets. And then Luke tells us what happened next in verse 6. When they did this, they caught a great number of fish, and their nets began to tear. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. So they go out there expecting nothing. They drop the nets, and it's as if all the fish were called over to just jump in this net. And they began to pile in this net, and it began to rip. And so then the other guys came over, and then they started pulling all these fish out, and both boats are so full they began to sink. And then check out what Peter did. Verse 8. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, go away from me because I'm a sinful man, Lord. Wow. He was so overwhelmed in this moment of this experience that this rabbi just simply said, let's go out there, drop the nets. He does so. Now all this craziness and pandemonium is breaking loose. And what it does, it overwhelms him so much because he knew he was not in the boat with just some everyday rabbi. He was in the boat with a man who had power over nature, to where fish would just pile into a net for him just to scoop it up and sink boats. And so due to this, he knew he was in some way or another, he knew he was in the presence of holiness. He was in the presence of God and God's hand on this rabbi. And so he just fell down and he was broken, and he just, in that moment, was so filled with guilt and shame over his sin. He said, please leave. I don't want to be here with you. This is intimidating. Now, Luke goes on and he adds these other details. Verse 9, he writes, for he and all those that were with him were amazed at the catch of fish they had taken, and so were James and John, Zebedee's sons, who were Simon's partners. You probably have heard about these two boys that ended up becoming disciples of Jesus. Those were his fishing partners. They were in business together. They were professional fishermen, and they were all amazed. But check out what Jesus said back to Simon. Don't be afraid, Jesus told Simon. From now on, you will be catching people. Then they brought the boats to land, left everything, and followed him. So in the midst of all this, Simon's mind is blown. James and John, same. Simon's there before Jesus, broken and humbled, saying, I don't deserve to be with you. Jesus looks down into the face of Simon and says, Simon, you don't need to be afraid. You don't need to be afraid. And these words are so powerful because what Jesus made clear was that the reason why I stepped in your boat, the reason why I told you let's go fishing, the reason why I made all those fish get in the boat is for this moment here. That I want a relationship with you. I'm not here to shame you. I'm not here to drag you. I'm not here to condemn you. I want a relationship with you. And then he very creatively told him that going forward in this relationship, what's going to happen is there's going to be a shift in your life from you going out and fishing for fish to going out and catching people. And with that, they took their boats to shore. They then left them there for the community to come and just take all the fish they wanted and needed. And then they went and walked away with Jesus to follow him to become his disciples. You know, the reason why I love this story so much are for a couple of reasons. One, it's a fun story, isn't it? It really is. So a preacher shows up and wants to get in a boat and go fishing, and then they end up catching all these fish, which should tell all you fishermen something about taking maybe a preacher with you from time to time when you want a great catch of fish, okay? Just kidding. It does not work with me. Find you another preacher that maybe it'll work with. It won't work with me. But it's a fun story. It really is. It's pretty amazing, really. But what I love about this story, really, and what God's been speaking to me through it, is this interaction between Simon and Jesus when Jesus told him, I want to go fishing. What Simon did is that Simon, first of all, responded by opening up and just telling him very plainly his take on Jesus' idea. And his take was, it's a bad idea. Let's take a rain check. And remember, Simon was a professional. And I'm not talking about a professional like you see on ESPN from time to time where they go out and catch fish for sport. No, Simon and James and John, these boys went out and they caught fish for a living to provide for them and their family and to sell. So these guys knew the tricks of the trade. So Simon begins by telling him, Jesus, look, this is going to be a colossal waste of time. But after he shared that with Jesus, he then goes on and he yielded to Jesus to say, whatever you want, I'll do it. Whatever you want, I'll do it. And I'm really thankful and glad he did. Because had he not done that, the story would have ended right there, wouldn't it? No, terrible idea. Let me drop you off at shore. Takes Jesus, lets him off. Jesus walks off. And at that point, Simon, James, and John would have missed out on the miracle of the fish, but even more than that, the amazing experience that Simon had with Jesus personally when Jesus looked into his face, the Son of God, and said, I want you. I want a relationship with you. Just come with me. Trust me. He would have missed out on that. And the reason why God's been using that in my life is because it, I believe, really captures for us a great picture of what this relationship that we have with Jesus, for those of us who have given our life to him, what it's to be like. What you see with Simon is that Simon, when Jesus told him what he wanted him to do, he shared his own personal thoughts with Jesus. He pushed back on Jesus. He told him why it was not a good idea. But he didn't stop there. After he did that, he then yielded to Jesus and said, but I'll do whatever you want to do. And as you look at this, and we think about a relationship, this is how all relationships should work, right? As people say, one's not to be a doormat. You hear this a lot in marriage counseling, that one's a doormat and the other one just walks all over them all the time. That's not a good relationship. That's a one-way thing. But for relationships to be healthy, each side has to be open to the hearts of the other. And what we see here is that, and we see it all through the Gospels, is that Jesus was open and receptive to what was going on in the hearts of people. And you see this even with Simon. He did not grill Simon for his lack of faith in this case. He did not push back or any of those things. He listened. And so Jesus wants to hear what we think. He wants for us to share our hearts. He wants for us to share our struggles, our doubts, our questions, that the way we see things. He wants that. But in the end, the way this relationship is to work is where we ultimately, after we do that, we yield to him. And we say, I'll do whatever you want, though. I'll do whatever you want. The way that God has been using this in my life is he's been showing me that for me, personally, a lot of times I get stuck just doing the first part and not doing the second part. I get stuck with things that I believe Jesus is calling me to do, that I see in the scriptures. I experience it through prayer, the Holy Spirit, through other people, God speaking to me. And where I get to this part and I go, yeah, and I start telling them all the reasons why this and that, and I shouldn't, and I don't think that works, and that doesn't make sense, and, based on my professional opinion, that type of stuff. And when I do that, I miss out on this, of yielding and then the miracles and then getting closer to Jesus relationally. And so what he's been showing me about that, and I'm just going to tell you how he's been speaking to me through it. You can use whatever word you want. But the big idea he's been showing me is this. Rest for your soul is found in letting go of your ego. Rest for your soul is found in letting go of your ego. We all have one. We all do. We all wrestle with pride inside. We all wrestle with wanting to be a self-made whatever. We wrestle with wanting to be strong on our own. We all do this. But it is our ego with Jesus relationally that is getting in the way of us getting closer to him and experiencing the life with him that we are called to experience with him. That's what's getting in the way of what he has for us. That's why we carry around this longing in our soul for more, and we don't understand what it is. That's why we want to say, okay, Jesus, why can I not have that peace and joy like I had when I first encountered you? What's going on? Well, it's our ego. It's the ego. And so whenever we have experiences with Jesus, which is to be day to day and in every area of life, the way that we need to think of this is that at every point, yes, we need to be open and honest and share where we're at and where we're struggling, be raw and real with him. He wants that. He wants to hear our hearts. He loves us. But then we have a decision to make at that point. And the decision really is between one of two attitudes that we can take. The first one is because I say so. Because I say so. This is the attitude of pride. This is the attitude of ego that I think a lot of us get stuck in. I'm going to do or I'm not going to do what you say, Jesus, because this is what I believe and what I think and the way things seem to me. That's really what we're saying. It's a because I say so attitude. And so this is where we get stuck. So we can choose at this point when he calls us to do something to get stuck here and say, because I say so, nope, not doing it. But what we're called to do, the proper attitude is what Simon said is because you say so. Because you say so, I'll go and drop the nets. Because you say so, I will do this, I will do that, I will do this, I'll do that. And I can make this practical. I will forgive. I will give. I will serve. I will fill in the blank. That we have to choose. And I'm telling you guys, this is where you're getting stuck. This is where I'm stuck. We're all stuck here. And we have to deal with this for what it really is. Yes, tell him what you're going through and why you think and what you feel. Give him your best arguments. But remember, just as Simon figured out, that rabbi, he was still the expert even on fishing that day, wasn't he? Even though he was not a professional fisherman. None of us are experts on anything. Jesus is the expert on everything. So he knows a little bit of what he's saying when he calls us to do things. So sure, give him all these things that you're struggling with. He wants your heart. But at the end of the day, you need to choose this attitude of, because you say so, I will go do this. And trust him. Whatever that is, trust him. Just this past week, I was wrestling with some things, and it's hard to describe these things. I'm sure you all have done this as well. But I was just having a day and probably a couple of days where I felt things were heavy. And as I was thinking through these things and all that, what I found is, and I've learned to hear the voice of the Spirit enough to know when the Spirit's calling me to do something. But what I'm really good at is ignoring him. Anyone else? Anybody else good at ignoring the Spirit? And the way you do this is you distract yourself with something else. You turn on the TV, social, find other things to do, okay? And so on this day, though, I was upstairs in the family room, and the Spirit was calling me, and really what he's leading me to do is to go and pray. I was like, okay. So went in the family room, locked the door, and as I walked in the family room, immediately I began to feel this flood of emotion. And the emotion that I felt was a desire for Jesus. So this is what I said to him as I was walking the family room. I said, Jesus, I want for you to come and sit with me. Now, guys, look, I know Jesus does not physically come in a room and sit with us, at least not on the norm. But he is with us, and his presence is with us by the Holy Spirit. So he speaks to us and connects to us through his Spirit who's in us. But when I invited him, or I told him that, it was from my heart. I just wanted to be with him. And as I was in that room and I sat down in flood of emotions and tears, I just began to share with him a number of things that I was really wrestling with. And I don't even remember what all those things were at the time. And I just was being honest with him and telling him why I was not doing this and doing that. And I feel conflicted over this. And what about this? And what about that? And as I shared those things with him, I began to experience his comfort, his love, freedom, joy return. And I'm telling you, there's just something cleansing about just being raw and real with God. And at the end of it, I just said, Lord, whatever you want me to do. I want you, and I want to do what you want more than I want to do what I'm currently doing. And so I share that with you to tell you that this experience with him in relationship is dynamic, and it's not a pray a magical prayer and then you're set for life, you just keep on trucking. That is not how this works. It is day to day. It is surrender. It is wrestling with him. It is sharing your heart, battling your ego, and then yielding to him. And through that, increasingly, we experience his miracles, and we experience this depth in knowing him that brings peace and joy and rest. Now, let me offer you a little encouragement before I close. As you follow Simon after this experience, and you follow James and John, what you find is just like all the other disciples, these boys, they had some ego problems. Remember when Peter told Jesus, he tried to correct Jesus, and Jesus looked at him and told him, "Get behind me, Satan." Y'all remember that one? That was one of those situations where Peter probably should have said, Jesus, here's what I think, but whatever you think, we'll do it. And he didn't do that. And Jesus said, hey, pipe down, get behind me. James and John, those boys are over there trying to use mama to help them get positions of power, believing Jesus was going to sit on a physical throne in Israel. So they sent mama over there trying to get Jesus to promise them these positions at his right and his left. And of course, Jesus had some things to say to them. The encouragement I want to share with you is that these disciples, face to face, they didn't even get it all right with Jesus. Their ego kept getting in the way too. So for sometimes when we start thinking, it'd be better if Jesus was here physically. No, you'd still do the same thing. And I would too. But the key is to learn from these things and to just continue to lean in and begin to remind yourself, I don't want to live with a because I say so attitude. I want to live with a because you say so, and yield your life to him. In just a moment, we're going to close with a song, and I asked Deanna to sing what has become one of my favorite songs, and it's Give Me Jesus. And what I love about this song so much is that the lady who wrote it, as she's singing it, there's a lot that's being said, but what she is ultimately saying is, I don't want anyone else. I don't need anything else. Just give me Jesus. That it's this cry of the heart. And I believe that if you are here today and you have this relationship with Jesus, that's really at the depths of your soul. And for those of you that have not given your life to Jesus, I will tell you, as what was true in my case, and there are others, hundreds of others here today that would say the same thing, that when you experience Jesus, that's when you know, oh, this is what my soul has been longing for. It's not an it. It's not a thing. It's a who. And it's the Savior of the world. It's my Creator. It's Jesus, the Son of God. And so when you give your life to him, that's where you find the peace, the joy, and the rest, and the life you've always wanted.